Hello. So I was going to show a few, or not a few, I want to show you the things that I bought over the last 2 days, yesterday and today. So, first thing I picked up was at a secondhand charity store, the Salvation Army store. And this is the soundtrack of the documentary The Fog of War. And you can see it's composed by Philip Glass. If you don't know, that is Robert S. McNamara, the former, who was a Secretary of State. Was he ever Secretary of Defense during Vietnam War era? I think he was in Kennedy's administration and in Lyndon Johnson's administration. Anyway, they made a documentary. Oh, there he is with LBJ. They made a documentary. Errol Morris made a documentary interviewing him. What have we about 20 years ago now? Actually, very interesting if you're interested in 20th century history, particularly that kind of period of the Vietnam War and all the things going on around that. I highly recommend that documentary. It's quite dry. It's a lot of it's just directly interviewing McNamara. But anyway, as far as the music goes, if you've heard it, there's kind of a constant background score, and that is composed, as it says there, by Philip Glass. Now, I got this for 50 cents, and you can see this was put on the shelf. What's today? It's today the 14th. So this was put on the shelf on the Thursday. I picked it up on the Friday. And that's often the thing, is that you have to just be lucky with when you get there. Not that this is a particularly lucky find, but there was absolutely nothing else at that place. And when I say nothing else, there was actually plenty of CDs, but something I've talked about a lot, and I'm kind of repeating myself, I've really noticed over the last 6 months, and even more so over the last 3 months, that the quality of the stock in these secondhand charity stores has plummeted. Absolutely taken a nosedive. It's almost all now exclusively compilations, classical compilations, whatever kind of compilations. Very, very little in the way of album releases by groups or bands or even solo artists, except for things that you find everywhere, like I've said before, Robbie Williams, Madonna, Susan Boyle, those kinds of things that were big sellers 20 or 30 years ago, but obviously people don't really listen to it nowadays. But in the way of actual quality stuff, and my theory is, so I came back to New Zealand in January 2020 after having lived overseas for a long time. And also, almost immediately, I kind of decided I'm going to start buying secondhand CDs. Okay? I was finding, just by passing by, I was finding things for like 50 cents or $1, like really good stuff. And so I thought, okay, this is a really great way to make up a collection here, because it's just spending $10 and getting 10 or 20 CDs. So then, COVID hit soon after that, and a lot of 2020, or at least the first half, a lot of it was in lockdown. New Zealand was relatively lucky, is that we had actually not that much time spent in lockdown. There was a bit more in 2021, but it was, a lot of people now look back in hindsight and go, oh, it was terrible, it was the worst thing on earth. But for me, it wasn't. There was a few weeks there where everything was closed except for supermarkets. But anyway, before and then after the COVID, kind of the main COVID area through 21, again, they kind of maintained a good level of stock quality in these secondhand shops. And that might have been to do with people during the time that they were stuck at home, cleaning out their closets, cleaning out things that they didn't want anymore, getting rid of it, taking it to the charity shops to get rid of. And so therefore there was kind of like a glut of stock. And I picked up hundreds and hundreds of CDs over that period through into 2022. Slowed up a little bit in 2022. Now, I can also understand that part of that is that once you get the things you want for your collection, you don't need them anymore. And so the amount of things you're finding is reducing. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, if I wanted to get, I don't know, whatever, all the Billy Joel CDs, which I have pretty much done, I get them all. And then I'm going to shops and seeing them still there. I think, oh, I don't need them. I already got them. Oh, there's nothing here. But I would even say that's that bigger thing, because I'm not even seeing things that I already have. And so into 2023, this year, I'm trying to think. This year, I'm trying to think if there was any like particularly good. Of course, I found things this year. I've made some, decent finds, but the, what do you call it? The frequency of finding these things is declined dramatically. And that when I'm going to shops now, I'm more often than not walking out with nothing. And I can spend the whole day going around shops, or a few hours going around different shops around my area or even further afield. And again, coming away with nothing. That didn't used to happen. And so yesterday I looked at a few places, but what happens is you go to these places and you find it's just the same shit over and over again, that you think, you kind of like takes all the motivation out of you. So I was saying my theory. My theory is that some group people, it might be like a group of organized group, or it could just be more kind of people all thinking in a similar way, are going around these shops, have more free time than me perhaps, and just picking out anything that is even remotely valuable or could be seen as valuable in the future. And so we're just left with shit everywhere. And unless you're getting in on a lucky tip, you happen to be at the place at the right time, then you're not going to find anything anymore. This is my theory. And the reason why these people are doing that is because I think they think that there's going to be some resurgence in the CD market, secondhand sales, like we've seen with vinyl. I don't think that's going to happen, in my opinion, because I'm even amongst people who are still collecting. I consider myself a collector, and amongst the collecting groups that I'm a member of, the prices are still, unless it's something exceptionally rare, if it's just a run-of-the-mill album that's maybe even a little bit rare, $5, $10, $10 max. We're nowhere near kind of like, oh, this fucking pressing from that such and such, I'll get $40 for that, or nowhere near that. And I can't, in the foreseeable future, see that happening. Again, this is all a theory. I don't know if this is true. But it's just, it explains why you just never find anything, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. It's not as though the average person is getting rid of CDs still. We're still in the offloading phase. We're not in the rebuying phase at all. So all I can assume is that someone is, or again, a group of people, because there are these professional buyers and sellers, not just of CDs, of everything, who go around these charity shops and just like, vultures, or however you want to, I'm not saying in a negative way, they do what they want to do, but they pick out things, they've got a good eye for things, they fill their houses with this stuff, and they can bide their time, 5-10 years, maybe longer, until this stuff comes back around and they can get a decent price for it. So therefore it's becoming a lot harder to find these things in secondhand stores, and it's much more of a slog. I can understand, I've talked before about like the thrill of, or even the thrill of the hunt, or the enjoyment of just kind of going through and then eventually kind of picking out this piece of gold within the shit. That's good to a point. But if you're just going around shop after shop after shop after shop, seeing the same stuff over and over again, absolutely nothing even close to what you want, and then coming around away at the end of it and finding absolutely nothing, it just becomes like, oh, I can't be bothered doing this anymore. And so what happens is that I find myself more and more going towards secondhand music sales, as in not secondhand charity shops where it's just people get rid of anything. It's more of a what do you call it? Curated stock. So the first two I'm going to show, these first two I got yesterday, and I've shown this shop before. I bought a few things from there over the months, and I find that, like I said, they have a very small stock of secondhand CDs, and the shop is about 85 to 90% vinyl, 10% CDs, and within those CDs, I'd say, a tenth of the CD shelves are secondhand. So very, very minimal amount. But every time I go there, I find something. And not just something, kind of want it, something that I've if it's a lower price, I'll get it. But if it's something a little bit higher, I actually wanted, there's always something there like that. And in this case, it was this album here, an album that I've been listening to a lot over the last 2 years on Spotify, Kings of Convenience, Quiet is the New Loud. Now, I don't know much about these guys. I didn't know anything about them until about a year or two ago. The way I was introduced to them was on Spotify through one of those random mixes where you play a certain kind of music and then that music stops and then it starts playing other things that the algorithm thinks you might like. And it was a remix by I think it's called Fortet, 4TET, Fortet, which is kind of an electronic act. I've heard bits and pieces from them over the last 5-10 years. They did a remix of the song by these guys, which is on this album, not the remix, the original, The Weight of My Words. So the very first thing I ever heard from these guys was a remix. And I really like that. So I thought, I wonder what the original version sounds like. And I listened, and I'd say maybe I like the original version even more than the remix. The remix is great, but yeah. And so that kind of opened me up to these guys. And I won't say I like everything they do. They are, how would you describe them? I'd say folk, acoustic, very mellow. So they're described here on Wikipedia as bossa nova, indie pop, indie folk. Yeah, indie folk is what I would say I would be closest to. They are from Norway, Norwegian. And they've been around since 1999. This album came out in 2001. Well, it's 22 years old. And they've had a few other albums. They've had an album in 2004, one in 2009, and then they had nothing until 2021, in which they released their fourth album. But if you like that kind of soft, mellow folk, more modern folk, like it says indie pop folk, then I would recommend these guys. Duo, two guys. Don't know who she is. Maybe it's his girlfriend. It's kind of strange. Like, he looks like the third wheel there, doesn't he? Like, a lovely romantic scene, and then Goob is there with them. Anyway, this was $5, secondhand $5. Now, $5 is a little bit above what I usually pay. Obviously, it was 50 cents is $1 what I'm usually quoting on here, but $5 for this is something that I never thought I would find. Certainly, I wouldn't find it in a secondhand charity shop. It'd be like a needle in a haystack. But even in a secondhand music shop, I didn't think I'd find it. So when I came across this, I was quite surprised, happily surprised. And $5, I was like, definitely get that for $5. So yeah. Now that song, I said there, The Weight of My Words, which is the first song I've heard of theirs. A very beautiful song. And particularly the lyrics, the weight of my words. When you hear that, or you think, what does that mean? The weight of my words, the heaviness of my words. Erland Uy and Eric Glumbeck Boy. What is the O with the E? I think I've said before, I studied Norwegian about 3 or 4 years ago. No, 4 or 5 years ago. It was a bit longer than that. And I was actually getting pretty good at it. And now I kind of remember the alphabet, how to pronounce the things. The that song "Weight of the Words," where he's singing about uh, the evolution of a relationship, I assume with a female, maybe it's a girl on the cover, and how over the time the weight of your words have less bearing. Your words have less weight. So maybe in the beginning of a relationship, you can say kind of things, and they have everything you say to each other has kind of meaning. Like the first time I say "I love you," for example, or something like that. But as over time, your words have less weight or less importance, and in some ways, you could say you lose your influence over the person, and they kind of you can't. Your words don't have the power they used to have. Anyway, I've listened to that song a lot, especially this year, and every time I've listened to it and listened to the lyrics, I've had a different idea about exactly what he's talking about every time, and I've kind of appreciated it in lots of different ways. It's a beautiful song, and like I said, the remix is great as well. The other song I got from there, so FO is Flying Out, so $5. This one here, something very different than I usually buy. This is Japan. Now I know even less about Japan, the band, than I did about Kings of Convenience. The reason I got this is because on a compilation I have, I think I've shown it before. Um, one of the songs is, I think it's the song Ghosts or Ghost. And I really like that song. And so when I always kind of I thought to myself, if I'm going to listen to, I'm going to listen to something else by these guys. And so when I saw this, I thought, okay, this looks interesting. The cover there kind of invokes the image of Cultural Revolution era opera from China. If you've ever seen those communist operas produced in China and North Korea, especially from the 60s during that Cultural Revolution era, they all have a kind of similar look, and that kind of invokes it there. The way they're standing, their postures, and the way his leg is apart and his hand on his knee. Their makeup, obviously the clothes with the red band is trying to show that as well. That kind of appealed to me. Kind of, think, well, why did they do that? What were they trying to say with that? Anyway, I listened to this once yesterday, and just on a first listen, it was interesting. I'd say I definitely need to listen to it more. So it's a compilation that was released in '96. So I don't know enough about which songs of theirs are famous and not, if this is the greatest hits or not. Don't know. I see Ghosts isn't on here, which is a song that attracted to me the first time, but I already have that song, so I don't really need. But yeah, I need to listen to it more to kind of get more of a feel of it. I think they're kind of in that new romantic kind of gang, that were from Britain, that kind of early '80s. So they say here art pop, new wave, glam rock, synth pop, post punk. So I definitely get a post-punk feeling from them. Not in as much as, say, like a Joy Division post-punk, but you can kind of get this kind of that general kind of feeling. So $3 for that. Today, I went to Real Groovy, which I've talked about a lot, complained about a lot. 2 secondhand CDs, Blue Dot. Now, Blue Dot is $8, which is definitely more than I usually pay for a secondhand CD, but I have paid up to $10 or $20 for a second-hand CD sometimes. But Tuck by Sigur, which I owned, when did this come out? 2005, I think. I owned this when it came out originally. Sigur, if you don't know, is an Icelandic, I don't even know how you describe them, kind of noise band, but no, they've got some kind of a lot of melody in their music as well. Post rock, I guess, in the very general. So they say post rock, art rock, dream pop, ambient. From Iceland, they sing in Icelandic. One of the albums, they actually sing in a made up language. Their stuff can veer into the background music area sometimes with me. So I used to have a friend who absolutely loved them. I actually introduced the band to my friend, but then she became kind of obsessed with them and then kind of inflicted upon me anytime I was near her listening to goddamn Sigur. So I kind of went off them for a while, but I think Tuck is a good album. Particularly like the song, I think it's Soglepur. What else to say about it? I saw them around the period they released this. I saw them in 2006 on concert at the St. James Theatre in Auckland. And a similar feeling to what I have about them. I thought it was a good show, but some of their music can be just so kind of drawn out with a similar kind of cadence of sound that it kind of merges into one for me sometimes. But anyway, it's an album I used to own. I've wanted to buy again for a long time. So I haven't seen it around before, secondhand, so $8. In pretty good condition. It's one of these cardboard dealies. As you can see on the side, here's a bit of munching, but you're not going to avoid that. And lastly, last thing I bought was from today. This was the Red Dot Special, which is a $3 disc. Now, one thing I say about Real Groovy is that everything was Blue Dot today. I saw actually quite a few things there I would have bought if they were closer to $3, but everything I picked up, Blue Dot, Blue Dot, Blue Dot, and it's like $8. A lot of these are not worth $8 at all. So I kind of chose one $8 one and then found one thing that was a bit cheaper, which was $3. And this is the Supergrass, the self-titled album from, what was it, 99, I think? 99, 2000-ish. Sometimes called the X-Ray album. I've talked about Supergrass before. I really love Supergrass on their first two albums, I Should Coco and In It For The Money. Especially In It For The Money is one of my favorite albums of the 90s. I love that album, and I've actually done a video about it. This is a pretty good album. I like this. I like Moving. I like the first four songs are all good. Mary. I don't like Pumping on Your Stereo. Too much of a novelty song. One of my favorite songs by them, but kind of a bit different and almost like a attack on song, is the last song, Mama and Papa, which I think the bassist Mick is singing. It's not Gaz Coombs singing it. It's like a really beautiful, kind of like almost childish song. Childish is maybe not the right to say it. It kind of gives me this feeling of old England. Not that I ever lived in England or even know, but, growing up and seeing it on TV and reading books and stuff, it kind of gives me the feeling of living in England as a kid in the 60s or 70s. Very beautiful song, Mama and Papa. If there's one song I recommend on this album, I'd say go listen to Mama and Papa. And then Mary. Mary's a good song as well. That was on the soundtrack for Blair Witch Project. Anyway, so yeah, I like Supergrass. I've owned this album before, and so $3, not bad. So yeah, some pretty decent things there. Thank you.